and Real Estate Radio Collab, a collaboration part 2, an extension of the radio show from this Saturday, which is every Saturday, live at 11 a.m. on 94.9 News Now, and Stimulating Talk. Gotta make sure I get the stimulating talk.
The whole
We like to
tagline.
be stimulated.
So, and before we went live here, we were just kind of chatting about how things change hour to hour, minute by minute. So this is going to be an ongoing conversation. What's happening with the economic stimulus package? What's happening in all of our markets? Greg, of course, joins us, in-source CPA, local CPA, and Pat Kenny, of course, Barnum Plans financial planner. So any of our markets, we'll take questions on, anything on the economic stimulus package, or even the stock market, Pat, even the stock market, we'll sneak in there. And of course, we've got Nicole White, One and Company, and I'm Byron Lazine with One and Company. So if you're streaming this on Facebook live in the moment, feel free to post a question in the comments, and we will get through all the questions before this stream ends. I want to start with Greg Antipoff. We were talking about, and you and I have been in communication back and forth, because full disclosure, Greg is my CPA, about the PPP loan. What is the PPP loan, and what has changed since it rolled out on Friday? What's working, what's not?
So PPP is the payroll protection program. It is a loan designed for employers. Basically, it gives employers 2.5 times their average monthly payroll. So essentially gives employers a block of money to keep their employees on payroll for an 8-week period. Banks began accepting applications on Friday. Most of them, to their defense, they got the final rules late Thursday night. When I mean late, I mean like between 10 p.m. and midnight. So some of them were able to accept applications on Friday. Some of them worked through the weekend and are accepting them. I'm seeing a little bit better acceptance now because the banks have had time to understand the rules a little bit. And some of the local banks who don't necessarily have the technology resources have had the weekend to kind of put things in place. I just want to touch on some of the technical things that have changed throughout. So it is a loan first and foremost. And so the terms of the loan are really great, though. It's only a 1% interest rate, and you have a term of 2 years to pay off any portion that is not forgiven. So it's a loan on the front end, but there are some criteria. If you meet that and you pay your employees over an 8-week window, including rent and utilities, you can have a portion or all of that loan forgiven.
It seems basic that if you just do those 3 things, pay your payroll, pay your rent, pay your utilities, that this loan will be forgiven.
Correct. Yeah. So I'd like to say we're heading into phase 2, but really I'd say 1.5. Everybody got their initial applications in on Friday or over the weekend or Monday. Now what I'm getting is sort of the underwriting process where now the banks are actually responding and they're requesting specific documentation. Once we get through that, hopefully the loans will be funded pretty quick. But yeah, what you're going to want to pay attention to in the 8 weeks following the distribution of this money is to make sure that you actually spend it on the right things. And that you actually spend it all within that time frame, because you would hate to get stuck with any amount of this money that gets converted to a loan just because you missed something by a couple days or a week. So phase 2 of what we're doing for our clients is going to be actually tracking that money and making sure that it gets dispensed. And then around week 6 or 7, we're going to look at where they are and say, are there any planning opportunities for us to use the rest of these funds? Like if you normally pay commissions to your employees or bonuses that you might be paying in a couple weeks or a month, if there's money left over, maybe we pay those now so that we can use up the remainder of our funds for this 8-week window.
Yeah, I think what you were talking about too, about a half hour ago, Greg, I just saw it on CNBC. There's already 178,000 applications in the queue and $50 billion worth of the 350. And Secretary Mnuchin, who's obviously part of the White House, is actually looking for another 250 billion. I think the uptake on this, we all kind of thought was going to be pretty aggressive. And I think kind of back to your point, I don't think the banks had any way to prepare for this. I mean, Bank of America was first to market, right? Because of the scale of their organization, they're a money center bank, they can do these things. But I think, the Charter Oaks and the locals, I think are just, there's so much involved in the back end of this. I mean, we talked last week about our unemployment as a state. The whole state couldn't handle the unemployment. you imagine being a 15 branch bank with 100 employees trying to process 15,000 applications, 1,500 applications even?
Yeah, and I can tell you from working with my clients who've worked with the different banks, every bank is asking for different information. And for me, as an accountant, I probably read into it more than I should have. And I read all 31 pages of the regs that went to the banks. And they're asking, some of them are asking for information that they're not even allowed to use to evaluate the loan. They're strictly supposed to evaluate it based on the average monthly payroll. Some banks are asking for financial information, all different things that they're not even allowed to ask for, evaluate. So that's sort of gotten into the mix too and slowing it up. But I tell you, Wells Fargo, as of yesterday, I didn't look today, they actually stopped taking applications because at the point they sort of looked at the 350 billion that was allocated for this, and they said, based on the applications we have right now, we're going to cap out. There's going to run out of money. So we can't even possibly take any more applications, because if we process everything we have, it'd be more than the government even allocated to this program.
Wow.
So they were a little bit more forward thinking in their equation there, where they said, hold on, let's do the math on this. We can't even possibly fund all the applications that we receive. So that's why we're no longer taking applications.
Bank of America, my bank, and they on Friday did not allow all of their business banking customers to apply first thing Friday morning. They only allowed banking customers that already had debt or open credit lines, right? Anybody that was debt free with Bank of America but had business banking accounts essentially was not able to upload their application on Friday morning. They had a lot of social and political pressure behind that decision, or opposing that decision rather, from Bank of America, that was overturned. And by Saturday morning, people that did not have lines of credit but had business banking with Bank of America were opened up. But to your point, Greg, Bank of America had said, I think in the first 24 hours, correct me if I'm wrong, but close to $6 billion worth of applications. I spoke on Friday to multiple small banks in Connecticut, all over the place. A lot of the contacts, people on board, people that are branch managers of these local banks, and they were all saying what you just said about Wells Fargo. Hey, we're only taking care of our customers because we know we're capping out here pretty soon on what we have available to send out on the PPP loan.
Yeah, and I think so. And that's the thing. So Bank of America, I think, made a bad move. I can understand everybody right now taking care of their customers. I think we're all in our various industries are facing questions that we don't have answers to. So servicing our own customers right now has become a much larger job than it has in the past. So I understand people not helping outside folks. But for Bank of America to say, not only do you have to be a customer, but you have to be a subset of our customers, I think that was a little bit of a move. I've shared my opinion on why I think they did that. It's not backed by any facts, but to this audience who didn't hear my explanation of why I think they did it is, they were looking out for themselves, right? They're saying, hey, if you happen to already have a loan with us, a mortgage with us, or a credit card with us, it's wise for us to give you the money. That way you can turn around and still make your credit card payment back to us and still make your mortgage payment back to us, rather than us, funding people who are going to use that money to go pay somebody else. Whether or not that was their actual intentions, I don't know, but I could see some strategic move there to make sure they were taken care of.
How does this loan, the PPP, Payroll Protection Plan loan, right? Is that the right name?
Payroll Protection Program, PPP, is pretty common now. Most people know what that is.
PPP loan, how does that compare to the small business disaster loan? And as a small business, why would you do one over the other, or can you do both?
Sure. So the easy answer is you can do both, as long as you're not using the funds for the same reason. Meaning, some folks, when the economic disaster relief loan came available, that was a lot sooner than the PPP. So some folks had already applied for that, saying, hey, I need this money to keep my employees on board. So if you happen to use that money for employees, you can't then take the PPP and use it, quote unquote, for the same purpose. Now, there are other purposes that you could use the economic disaster relief loan for. maybe you had a decline in business and you have other ongoing expenses that you have to support that aren't covered by the PPP, because the PPP is specifically intended for employees, but they do give you the leeway to also use that money for rent or lease, or if you have a pre-existing mortgage obligation in utilities, to use the money for that. But if you have other needs, the economic disaster relief loan is the way to go. Most people I know are applying for both. Most people I know have not gotten a response on either loan, not even a confirmation. So, I mean, I would encourage people, if you do have a decline in business and you can attest that you've been impacted economically, I would apply for the disaster relief loan. Now, the terms of that loan, it's a 3.5% interest rate, and the term, it's no defined term like the PPP in terms of how long you have to pay it back. This one is going to be determined when you apply for the loan based on your ability to pay it back. So there's going to actually be if you take the PPP underwriting process, they're only going to look at your average monthly payroll. And they're going to have a couple documents they look at just to make sure that number is reasonable. They're going to look at your payroll tax filings from last year and say, yeah, okay, this number is reasonable based on that. And actually, the banks aren't taking any risk on this. It's all on the client and on the SBA. So as long as the client attests that this is their numbers, the SBA is going to back it. The banks really are just a throughway here. And quite frankly, they're making a lot of money. I mean, they on a loan up to 350K, they're making 5% writing these loans. So there's good money to be made there for the bank with basically no risk.
Who's paying the 5%?
The SBA. So on these loans, any of these loans right now, the banks cannot charge the borrower anything. And me, if I'm considered an agent and I assist a client with filling out these applications, I cannot even charge for this right now. The only thing that and from my example, normally when we do an SBA loan, it's about a $2,400, $2,500 engagement for us, because there's a lot of financial information we have to pull together and do projections and things like that. Now, on the payroll protection loan, it's simple. We just have a simple calculation to do the PP, to calculate the average monthly payroll. So not charging a fee there is understandable, especially for my existing clients. Now, on the other side, we don't know what they're going to ask for the loan for the disaster relief. They may need us to put together projections and actual financial reports. And that's the thing. So the majority of what I do as a certified public accountant, that's what CPA stands for. The majority of what I do not need a license for. I don't need anything to do it, except for when it comes to the fact of when we're actually creating financial reports. That's when a CPA, sort of holds its value, because the banks and the public are relying on our opinion in that situation. That's the only time our license really comes into play, is when we have to certify that those reports are accurate and the banks can rely upon those. So we don't know yet for the economic disaster relief if they're going to require certified financial reports or not. So the underwriting for that one might be a little bit more labor intensive as we head into sort of the phase 1.5, where they actually start to evaluate those loans or underwrite them.
We're streaming live with Greg Antipoff, CPA, certified. What did you say? Public
accountant. Yes.
Certified public accountant.
Good thing you went over that.
I know that CPA is the highest level of accounting. Is that correct? It's like the black belt?
Well, it's the certification, but I'm somebody who doesn't believe in pedigree. My point is, I don't believe in where you went to school or what certifications you have, even though, I have the huge piece of paper with everybody's signatures on it. It's about any of us in any of our businesses, doesn't matter about the educations, the value you bring to the client. There's a lot of people right now that are just bookkeepers that are bringing tremendous value to their clients in this program. And there's a lot of people that are CPAs and lawyers and have all this knowledge and are doing nothing for their clients right now. So it doesn't, I have the certification, but,
don't get me started on that train. I'm right there with you. So Greg Antipoff, CPA, InSource, and Pat Kenny, Barnum Plans, financial planner. Chance Martin says in the comments, keep us all informed. Chance, hope you're doing well down in that Florida sun. If you got a question for Greg, Pat, or even me and myself or Nicole on the real estate market, please put your comment or your question in the comments rather, and we'll be happy to answer all of your questions. I think last week when we did this, we gave away some gift cards to the giftcardproject.com. We donated a few gift cards. We donated 3. Right? We'll donate 2 this time. First two questions we'll donate gift cards to the giftcardproject.com, which is basically local gift cards. In this case, we're going to use some of the real estate radio stockpile. We have a stockpile of gift cards. You know, stockpile is a pretty trendy word right now. We have a stockpile of local gift cards.
You're hoarding them.
We are hoarding them. Hoarding them for good causes, to give away on the radio show and to donate to things like this. So we'll donate first 2 questions that have to do with any of the markets, the economic stimulus package, the PPP loan, the disaster loan. Those first 2 questions will donate gift cards to thegiftcardproject.com. And there's a whole bunch. Nicole, what are some of the causes that are these gift cards are going to for the Gift Card Project?
So they're going this week, actually, is our big push, because we are going to be going to Yale New Haven Hospital to be donating them to all of the nurses and doctors on the front line, as well as the other sort of half is going to be going to Madison Youth and Family Services, to go to families that obviously are in need now too. So food, again, obviously they're going to need clothing afterwards too. So whatever people donate from the small businesses will go there. So those are our 2 pushes this week.
It's a 2-for-1, small
It is a
business
2-for-1.
gift cards, and those are going to local people that need them now. So love that. Put your questions in the comments. We're going to donate 2 gift cards over there. Pat?
Sir.
Last week, we were talking about how Q1 was the worst, or maybe it was Saturday in the radio show. Either way, we were talking about how Q1 was the worst decline for the stock markets in history. Am I correct?
Worst decline in history, worst start to a year since 2008. So the way you want to, not how you want to get out of the gates in the first 3 months. What's going to be interesting now is, we're through Q1 now, right? So now it's when we see the shutdown in the next coming months here start to actually affect the economics. Right now we're staying inside, we're doing the things, and everybody's panicking. But now, when Boeing and United Airlines and Carnival Cruises and Yum food brands and those companies have to report their numbers now coming up, the massive declines, we see it at a local level. This is obviously happening nationally to these major brands that are employing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, that are furloughing. Like Macy's, which we've talked about, retail is failing as it is, but Macy's laid off 97% of 120,000 employees. All the stores are shuttered. Their online presence is mediocre, in my opinion, at best. So, their economics and their reporting is going to be absolutely terrible. We're going to see that just all across the markets in the coming quarter. So we're going to see how that goes. I mean, it's a rough way to start the year, and it might get rougher.
I think there'll be some companies, though. You mentioned Macy's, that they just needed an opportunity like this to really flatten and kill them off. I mean, Macy's, right. My God, who shops at Macy's, whether it's online, in the store, or they're dropping you off free stuff in your driveway? I don't really know any. It's like
they have a parade. They do the parade.
Yeah, I mean, they shouldn't exist anyways. And I think, not to put anybody down at Macy's or anything, but they haven't innovated in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is an opportunity for it's providing cover for certain businesses to say, hey, we can disappear now under this guise and go out with some respect versus just shutting our doors because, our business model is poor.
Yeah, we failed for a cause, not for not because of our own doing.
Right. Pat, we're 6 days into Q2 and we've seen the markets go up so far. Is that just based off of hype, headlines? So, what is it?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the whole thing, right? It's always my opinion. So let's caveat that it's my opinion. This isn't advice. Just
give
listen.
all your disclaimers now so we can hit you.
Well, no, we need a whole nother video for that. So, again, obviously just my opinions, right? These aren't recommendations. But one of the things that we've been talking about, and I had a very long conversation with a client last night about this, was one of the things that's a little unsettling about the very large pop that we had yesterday, which is we did almost 8% gain yesterday in the S&P. It was a really good day. We're still in the green, although we've given away, I keep looking at TV, we've given away a pretty, basically all of the gains, but we're still in the green, which is fine. One of the things that's a little unnerving is that we're hearing pockets of positive news about the virus, right? Like parts of Europe are showing less positive tests. Spain was doing well. They had an uptick in deaths again today, but and that's kind of, in my opinion, kind of a false flag a little bit. I think one of the things that is very concerning in the U.S. and I know we've talked about this either off air, on the radio show, on this video we did last week, But the thing that's going to get really unsettling is as the ability to test increases, the volume of positive tests is going to grow exponentially as we can test more people. What I think the media is going to do, and it makes sense because it's what always happens, is how you get people engaged, is we're going to see these huge headlines about hundreds of thousands of new positive tests, and we're not going to talk about the fatality rate, which isn't going to go up. It's not going to go up with it. If we can test 1 million people, we're still going to have, whatever the fatality rate is right now, I think less than 1% or 1.1%. Just because we test 10 million people, that doesn't mean we're going to have 15% of these people passing away. We're going to have spikes in reported cases, which are going to make the headlines. And I don't think people are going to pay attention to the actual severity of the fatalities and the numbers, which is, I think, is going to drive the markets back down again, at least in the short term. We're still on very shaky ground. There was a change at the White House today that was announced at about 2:30 in the afternoon. We changed an inspector general. One of them was moving from the Treasury Department, has now been sent back to the Pentagon, and has been taken off of overseeing the $2.5 trillion stimulus package. We're going to put somebody else in charge of those dollars. And just that news alone shaved about 300 points off the market in about 10 minutes. So we're still very wobbly right now. Every kind of headline, either way, I think will have a massive impact. So, we see yesterday was a really, really strong day on the back of some positive news from reporting. Less cases, less people passing away, which are great pieces of news, but they're also very fleeting, I think. So we're going to see. It's going to be hold steady and, make sure that you're not paying too much attention to the news, because you're going to get just overwhelmed. There's just too much out there.
The volatility in the stock market creates so much uncertainty that people think we're in a recession. But by definition, are we currently in a recession?
So by definition, it's 2 quarters. So we're not there yet. Only because 2 quarters of contraction of GDP. We're not there yet because we haven't reported the second quarter yet. But the likelihood of the economy going from where we are at the end of March 31st, spiraling back up at an unbelievable rate to end June in the positive, to not end up in a recession. Technically, no, by definition, we're not. But anybody you ask is, the U.S. economy is in a recession at this point. We're so far down.
The definition of being in a recession is a lagging measure to what's happening right now, basically.
Yeah, it's not. The technical definition can't possibly keep up with the speed at which the markets moved in the first quarter. All of the signs point to a recessive economy, but at the same point, the fundamentals themselves aren't broken. Like there's nothing has gone wrong like it did in 2008, where the financial sector completely fell apart and the mortgage crisis happened, or in 2000, 2001, where we had the .com bubble followed by the 9/11 attacks. That's not what happened. We have an economic slowdown because literally everyone has been told to stay inside, and businesses have shuttered their doors, which I think is the right move for this. So
we have a question from our very own Yola Sinclair, transaction coordinator, One & Company, also a listing manager. If a retail business is only open for online sales, but the actual store is not open during this current situation, are they eligible for the PPP loan? That's probably going to be Greg.
Yeah, so technically, essentially every business right now qualifies for the PPP as long as you check the box saying you've been affected by the COVID virus economically. And so it's not so much determined on how much business you're doing. It really depends on what do I want to say? Whether or not you're paying your employees. So you qualify for it to get it as a loan. Now, that's phase 1. Step 2 is whether or not you qualify to have it forgiven. If you take that money and you don't actually use it for your employees, there's no portion of that that's going to be forgiven.
Do the employees have to actually be working, or can you just pay them what you've always paid them because there's not really anything for them to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. You just have to pay them. They don't actually have to be working. So the idea there is, obviously some businesses are open either out of necessity, by definition of the government. They're essential, but they've seen a downturn in business, so they need supplemental income to pay their employees. They qualify. Again, we mentioned last time, like about here in the state of Connecticut, for example, hair salons and barbers, they've been forced to close their doors. They can't even open. For this program, though, it gives them the option, if they want to bring their employees back and pay them through payroll, they can use that money to do so.
So
Now,
what if someone's, but I don't mean to interrupt, but what if someone
please.
already has gone for unemployment and then they start receiving this money? Do they then lose their unemployment because they're then getting 2 months worth of pay? Because then obviously they'll have to apply again, right?
Yeah. So there's a date, and I don't know the specific date, but there's a window. If you apply for this loan and you get approved, you have a certain amount of time when you have to bring your employees back, because the idea is to keep everybody employed here. And also, there's also sort of a penalty is if your employment level drops below a certain amount during this period, a portion of the loan won't be forgiven. The idea is hey, us as management, maybe we're going to pay ourselves and we're going to lay off, our hourly workers, but we'll take care of us. So there's a penalty there to say, no, let's take care of everybody. But yes, so for businesses, this is the conversation we're having. The example is the salons. Before I went to real estate exclusively, I have a couple hair salons, and they can't open. So the conversation there is their employees have already started collecting unemployment, or at least have applied to. So they're probably better off staying there instead of us taking a loan, having to bring them back on payroll. And then if this lasts longer than 8 weeks, then putting them back into the unemployment system, which if this does last longer than 8 weeks, that system is even going to be more overburdened then. So essentially, because of the provisions the federal government has done to back the unemployment system, once these employees do start collecting, for 4 months, they're going to get whatever they qualify for under the state's equation, plus an additional $600 per week. So they're going to be made whole, or even a lot of cases more than whole, by being on unemployment. And that employer, as unfortunate as it is, can just kind of stay on the sidelines right now and not have to worry about participating in this program, doing the accounting involved. They can just say, listen, we're closed right now. The employees are being taken care of. But it's different business by business. But typically in a business like that, that's forced to close right now, has no choice, that's typically the conversation we're having.
And I'm not an accountant, obviously, but a little just from a business perspective, I've heard this before in, conversations online or wherever, that, hey, I want to do the PPP. I want to keep my people employed, but I don't have anything, what Nicole said, I don't have anything for them to do. I find that utterly ridiculous. And any business owner that says that probably shouldn't take the PPP loan. They should probably go on unemployment themselves, because any business owner that with that mindset that they don't have anything for their people to do during this time has absolutely no vision. And those aren't the small business owners that are going to evolve and pivot and change the course of their industry as we go through this. Let's use the hairstylist as the example. Oh, well, if there's no hair to cut, we have nothing to do. Really? You can't do training videos all day long? TikToks, Instagrams, YouTubes, that'll take you all day right there if you do those 3 platforms and do a training video and edit them properly and put all the tags and want to have some distribution behind that, right? Just the training videos of how you can be maintaining your hairstyle while at home is great branding for the future. It could be those back end systems, right? Oh my gosh, we've never had a great CRM. We don't know how to engage our clients in our database on an email campaign, right? Our accounting systems are we're just going at week to week and we don't have any organization behind that. We don't have an investment program that our employees can engage with when they do start working. Like all these things that are, I'm going to get to that someday, that are on my checklist. If you're not a business owner and using this time to tackle those, then you probably should go on unemployment and then look for a job, a job, because those are going to be the businesses that'll be left behind. Unfortunately, in this situation that we're in, there are going to be a lot of small businesses that are left behind. I'm super proud locally. What I've seen here in Connecticut up and down the shoreline is so many of these small business owners taking a hard pivot, taking their business plan, throwing it out, coming up with a new one overnight, and doing more with less, as we've said a bunch of times. Yola followed up to her question and asked, if there, Greg, if there are not any other employees, just the owners are the employees, can they still qualify for the PPP loan?
Yeah, you do qualify. And so the self-employed and independent contractors, beginning this Friday is the date when the banks can start accepting applications for those folks. What's not clear is whether there's going to be a forgiveness provision, though, on the individual business owner who's taking one of these loans. There's very clear instructions about how businesses with employees, what the equation is going to be to have that forgiven at the end. There is no guidance on whether an individual is going to be. So, but as an individual, if you're a sole proprietor, or you do what's called a Schedule C on your tax return, that's where you're going to want to look to calculate your monthly average payroll for you. It's the last number on Schedule C. It's going to be what your net income is. You're going to take that number, divide it by 12. That'll give you your average monthly, up to $100,000. So if your income happens to be over $100,000, just take $100,000 divided by 12. It's $8,333. That's your average monthly payroll. That's the number you're going to use for self-employed or independent contractors.
In terms of, this is just something me and Nicole and I were going to potentially talk about it on a Real Word, but I don't feel that we've got the information in just our industry, real estate agents going on unemployment, because I have heard some real estate agents looking to, take advantage of the unemployment opportunities that have opened up for even independent contractors. If you're a real estate agent and then all of a sudden you have a deal that goes under contract, you have a buyer that goes under contract and you're on unemployment, how does that even work? I don't understand that.
So in full disclosure, honestly, I'm not overly familiar with unemployment, and I'm getting a lot of questions now. And here's why. I typically work with business owners who historically business owners have never qualified for unemployment. And that's because, we've talked about this all before on here and on the radio show. We're all, those of us on this live call are sort of can steer our own ship, right? So we have the ability to determine how much we make to an certain extent, depending on the systems and processes we put in place and how much we're out there. So that's typically what the self-employed is. So you don't qualify for unemployment because it'd be very easy for a self-employed person to say, "Oh, I'm unemployed now," right? To just give up and start collecting, right? And there's no way to test whether their business really failed or they're just lazy, in full disclosure. So now that people can qualify for it, I've been having this conversation, and it's been hard for me to have the conversation because I have a personal belief about it versus what the law says. And I'll tell you both. Under the law, a realtor or anybody else now who's self-employed, Uber driver, can file and collect. Now, that's the law. My opinion is, and this goes back to your previous point, is there's so much you can actually be doing right now in your business. And this is the time to do all of those things that you've said I don't have the time for. And, do you have to be getting in the car with somebody else right now and doing showings? No, but this is the time to get all those systems and processes in place and do your prospecting in a 21st century way. So technically, I see that you're still employed. But yes, what's going to happen from a technical standpoint, you have to file for unemployment once, and then I think there's a process every week. You have to log in by a certain day and answer a bunch of questions. And some of those have to do with whether you've earned income or things like that.
Greg, to your point, 543. 543. I just went on the MLS just right now while you were talking, and I punched in the 3 counties that our particular team, One & Company, focuses on in Connecticut, New London County, Middlesex County, and New Haven County. And over the last 7 days, in really the heat of the battle, right? In one of the toughest weeks we've had going through this situation. I understand the next couple of weeks are going to get even tougher. But over the last 7 days to this moment on the MLS, there have been 543 properties that went under contract. That includes condos and single families all together in one number. That means for a real estate agent, a licensed real estate agent, over the last 7 days, you've had 1,000.
Are you doing it in your head?
1,086 opportunities to be on the side of a deal. There are 1,086 sides to a sides out there in the last 7 days. That's a lot of activity in any time frame for those 3 counties combined, and a lot of opportunities for real estate professionals.
So I think this goes back to the point we were discussing with Macy's. I think it's a good time. There's people right now that are looking at this as a forced vacation, and not forced like they're forcing themselves to be on. They're using it as an opportunity to say that. And I've heard every rationalization between, and I get it. Some of it is real. I don't want to expose my family. I don't want to do this, that. But there's a lot of ways to put these things together. I will never say, oh, you should be out there pounding the pavement right now because you're considered an essential service. I get that. But I think there's a lot of people that are choosing to remove themselves from the marketplace right now, artificially. And they're rationalizing to themselves, but technically in that scenario, you're really not unemployed. I mean, you can say I'm scared to go to work, or I don't want to show up, or I don't want to meet with people, but the opportunity is still there. So it's really the mindset of, are you somebody that's taking this time right now? And while things are slower, you can really work on your time. Because I think in this industry of real estate, there's a lot of time where as an individual agent, your time is being pulled by other people, right? You don't have a lot of time where, especially unless you're a team leader or you're running the brokerage, but even then you have to answer to your individual agents, but often you're answering to your clients. But now's a time where things have slowed down. So it's on you to do the things that you've always wanted to do and have the time to put processes in place. So, it's a struggle I'm having every day when I have these conversations to say, well, technically, I don't see you as unemployed. This is a huge opportunity right now to hit the reset button.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I don't even know how you can, as a real estate, Pat, I'll let you go in a second here. I don't even know as a real estate agent, you could claim that you're unemployed when there was 1,086 potential job openings over the last 7 days that your name could have been on as a real estate salesperson. Go ahead, Pat.
Well, I think like this is one of those, I don't want to say once in a lifetime, but this is one of those rarely in your lifetime opportunities to just change. Like this is forced progression. And like Byron, you've heard me say this before. I mean, Greg, you deal with other guys like me, so you've probably heard this. So like the financial services industry as a whole is a dinosaur. It's slow moving. It's unbelievably regulated, as well it should be, but almost to a certain degree of failure. There are so many things that are handcuffs that are completely out of control. I mean, like my business is based almost solely on the phone and on Zoom and on team meeting. Like that's all that we really do anyway, because my partner and I, we have clients in 37 states. So like this is necessarily, minus the fact that like I have a Peloton bike behind me now, as opposed to like my office wall, it's not really much different from me day to day. But what's really interesting is the way that our back office has to operate now, because most brokerages and companies that work in the financial services industry are very paper laden, wet signatures, like kind of almost crazy. And it's like archaic. And it's
Is that by choice or regulation?
Some of it's so the regulation gives a lot of leeway. It's to the individual brokerages where they get to make a decision on their part. And it's really the level of liability they want to take on, because every layer you peel back, you're opening yourself up potentially for something unless you replace that layer of oversight with something. So when you take wet signatures out of the way and you make them all digital, how do you then enforce record keeping? Because that's a huge piece of my business is having documentation for things, very much like real estate, right? You can't not have documentation for a real estate transaction. That's a pretty sizable thing. I think you told me the story about trying to getting into city halls when they were first shutting down to record sales was not a thing, or digital notaries, those kind of things are it's forced progression. Again, I think it's really interesting. And we've been talking about it on our side, my partners and I, about it's actually kind of exciting. And I'm interested in seeing how, because the industry doesn't have a choice, just like you guys, we're deemed essential. I mean, like if you can't access your monies through me that I manage, then what are you supposed to do? Some of these people are in huge trouble. They changed early withdrawal rules on 401k retirement plans because they're trying to give people access to assets, but without having a me or someone like me to call, how are you supposed to do that? So I think really pushing stuff forward and making them start to move into things like digital signatures. I know it sounds outrageous, especially if, I know most of your business is done remote. The fact that we only had we have 3 separate and distinct lines of service that we operate in, and different parts of the business that we run, that one of them had the ability to sign digitally. Everything else had to be wet signatures. With the amount of business that just our small practice produces, that's thousands of pieces of paper a year and hundreds of signatures that were completely ridiculous. There's no reason to do it that way. But everything, I mean, my UPS bill every month was outrageous because we had to send things back and forth. And it's really forcing a pivot into new kind of avenues, very much like the real estate world is virtual, virtual tours and those kind of things, and doing everything remote. That's all very, I mean, as an outsider looking in, I think that's very interesting. I mean, I'm a little more of a nerd, I guess. I'll admit that I am a big tech adopter, but like the idea of buying a house remote isn't really that scary to me. I think it's very interesting. And because it's new, I understand it's a little scary to the average person, but I think that there's something to be said for what this is doing to us as a country, as an economy, in terms of how we don't have a choice but to adapt. Otherwise, you're right, we'll be filing for unemployment and waiting for somebody to reopen to go get a job.
Well, a lot of the things that we're talking about are so basic that they've been around for over a decade. And a lot of people have been resistant in my industry, in real estate, and I'm sure, in your industries as well, where the players have been resistant because they've been doing the other thing, the paper thing, for the 2 decades prior to that, right? And they don't want to change in that 3rd decade, but this will force that change. This will leave those behind that do not want to adapt. In our business, we're lucky as real estate agents. There's not one thing, especially now that they've changed the closings, there's not one thing though that a real estate agent, even before they changed the closing side of it, there's some wet ink that needs to be done at the closing, and they're now getting those through with some digital notaries and stuff like that. There's not one thing that a real estate agent is required to do on paper. All of it can be done electronically. That's been the way it's been for years now, actually. But a lot of agents choose to scan and paper and get it, like literally the fact that they'd get in their car, go pick up paper documents, drive to an office, scan it through the machine, print it out, sign it, scan it back in, figure out how to get it over to their email, when they could have done all of that sitting on their phone at home. It's like, it's stupid, actually. It's quite stupid.
Every time they scan it, it's a little bit more turned, rotated than the last time. But so, I think though the forced change is great, because I think right now certain businesses, in order to survive, they have to change. So to Pat's point, if they required the wet signatures, certain lines of business would go out of business right now. But I think there's also time where literally this may have been something they've wanted to change over time. It's just never been a priority, where now nothing else is going on. So now it's a priority to change that. And Byron, I've recently sent you 2 documents to e-sign. One of those you're allowed to e-sign, and the other you're not, in the IRS's eyes. But I bear the risk on one of those, because having to get the wet signature on one of those documents I sent you is just not worth it for me. But what I'm hoping, because the IRS in the past week has changed the requirement for wet signature on certain documents, that now, because the IRS is required to work remotely, I'm hoping that they will now say, okay, that one where you can sign a personal document electronically, but you can't sign a business document electronically, will go away, because it's the same form, but just because one's for a business and one's for an individual, it's ridiculous. So I'm hoping. But the other thing is, a lot of businesses have now changed to do things that make sense, that as a consumer we've wanted. The fact that I can now buy a car and not have to go to the dealership and play that game, they will bring it to me. Like, that's phenomenal. Everybody has wanted that. They will sell far more cars now, because nobody wants to go in that hot seat for 3 hours and play all the tricks that they've learned from Grant Cardone are getting pummeled at you. Just let's figure this out online and give me my car, and you'll sell far more cars.
The one thing I will say, Greg, is I do, as cool as Carvana delivery is, I do want to go to one of the vending machines and drop the giant coin in to get my car.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just don't like. Really cool. I don't like being in the hot seat where you're like, I have to block off 8 hours of my day because they're going to sit there and play this game with you.
Yeah.
And run through all the tactics and strategies they have, especially as a financial professional. Don't give me the game of, well, what do you want your monthly payment to be? Like, listen, and then they come
Zero.
and I say, yeah, I want it to be $200. And they go, great, you're approved for 96 months. And it's like, well, no, it's not any kind of financial deal. So anyways, but there's certain first innovation that, if these industries stick with it, they're probably going to see more business on the outset of this than they've ever seen.
What type of, if any, optimism are you guys hearing from your closest clients? Are they, some of the people that are glass half full people, what are you hearing that's uniquely optimistic?
So I think I have clients that are in two boats. I think 3/4 of my clients are going to be far better outside of this because the nature of who I work with is more growth-minded folks anyways, as small business owners and a subset of business owners. So I think they're taking this time to reset and are going to grow. And I think the other quarter are probably going to see that it's time to either find a different industry or to move on. But in terms of optimism, I think the forced reset and the forced time right now is, hey, now is the time to learn Google Sheets and all of the Google Suite because it's time. I have the time to do it now, and I don't need to have a Word document, Excel on my computer, and I can now share it with my team. These are the kind of things certain people are doing that they're, in Zoom. We've talked about this before. If I had $1 for everybody that said, hey, there's this app called Zoom, you should check it out now. We do our family gets together, but these are things that now technology people are being opened up to, which I think is going to be great for all industry.
I agree. I mean, again, listen, it's like forced evolution, right? I mean, it's business evolution. You can't really operate the same way because you literally cannot do it. So, I mean, my clients have been very, very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of, we are very fortunate. We work very closely with, people that we like and people that like us. So, I mean, we're not, I'm not getting screamed at by people who are like, why didn't we do this or why didn't we do that? I'm very lucky. Not that I'm sure that there isn't somebody out there who wants to have that conversation with me, but they get to have it once and then they get to go find a new advisor because you don't get to scream at me. It's not how it works. We have some unique insight with some of the clients that we have that do work. I have a client who works at Mount Sinai, which is, the absolute epicenter of, that's ground zero in New York. And, there is some optimism. We as a country, I mean, I think you guys have heard me say this before, unless you're banking on the United States of America going out of business, this too will pass. You just have to grind through it. I mean, it's not going to be a tremendous amount of fun. I mean, we look back from basic math, right? You look back at all of the economic crises and you can pull these stats down. The 6 month and the 12 months following any economic crises are amazing runs of recovery. The peak to the trough, the highest high to the lowest low, it is always, it's for lack of a better term, a hell of a ride, but you have to be able to hang on to it. Those people that are currently retired, obviously that's a different conversation, right? I mean, people who are living off of their assets that are in the market, there's a little more, there's some more nerves involved, but, part of what we do is not to try to predict the markets and predict the future, is to make sure that people have a smart place to get money from if they need it. And that's, really part of what we position ourselves as your emotional guide through this. The average person sees the markets do really, really well, gets jealous because they're not making any money, puts a whole bunch of money in, then it loses, they panic, they bail out, and that's how they hurt themselves, as opposed to looking at it as an opportunity, right? Which is really what, not to diminish the effect and the health effect, obviously, of the virus, but we're in a really interesting time to be in, not just in the US, but like to be in our markets where we are, to be given this kind of chance to rebuild and, kind of like Greg said, the forced reset. We're all starting over to one degree or another. And I think we're going to come out better at the end of all this.
This has been pretty business focused. And before we wrap up, I'd like, and anybody can jump in, I'd like your opinions or even experiences so far, more of a holistic question, I guess. People or even yourself, do you think there's going to be a lot of life reevaluation through this and after this, where people make significant changes to the way they live, whether that's where they live, how they live, health-wise, travel wise? Are you going through it personally, or do you talk to people that are going through some type of life reevaluation?
Nicole, you've been quiet. What do you think?
Ooh, me?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's I have talked to a lot of my like parent friends, because obviously it's important for me to sort of like I have one friend, her husband is a Delta pilot. Obviously, I think they're saying that they're losing almost $50 million a day right now in the airline industry. His job is guaranteed until September, but their concern is obviously that people won't want to necessarily travel afterwards still. So I do think that there is going to be a big impact. I don't know how quickly people are going to um I don't know how quickly people are going to necessarily sort of like change. I think that'll all sort of depend on how long this takes, to be honest. Because I think that if this goes on for a really long time, I feel like everyone's still really scared. So I feel like it's hard for me to know who's going to really make or decide to make a change because so much has been forced on them to change right now. I do think that there are obviously some people that are living in areas that will probably want to move, or obviously if they're stuck in a house with a spouse that they don't like, maybe they'll make that change. But I do think that I think it'll take a little bit of time afterwards to see exactly where people are feeling the most steady, to then make those changes. I mean, I would love to travel now that I'm stuck in my house, but it's true. I mean, I don't, until I know sort of how the world looks afterwards, is that even going to be something that I feel comfortable, participating in the end. So I wish I had a better answer, but that's how I feel.
The New York Post reported a couple days that divorce inquiries are way up over the last 2 weeks. So
Well, I saw in the news yesterday that they actually have had to come up with its own domestic violence task force because there's now a 25% increase in domestic violence, and again, they don't know if that's because they're now being forced to stay home with them, or so it's now worse, or if they're now having to call 911 because like they legitimately need help because they have nowhere to escape to. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of horrible. I mean, I can't even imagine children. Like I'm lucky enough to live in a town where they're providing computers. And again, even within this community, my husband's a teacher here at the high school, and he even has some students that haven't even checked in yet, and they're in the high school level. So again, it'll be interesting to see like what really happens to everybody across the board for sure.
Yeah, more time equals more opportunities for some of that bad stuff to happen, more time in the house. So that's an unfortunate byproduct. I thought the divorce rate was interesting just when you connect that to real estate on a slightly sleazy level right there.
Well, and it's funny because you're the one that's like, don't ever post anything that says, do you want to quarantine in this house? But I
No.
mean,
That's cheesy advertising, but
Oh, don't worry. I only saw that about 16,000 times.
I know.
Yeah, you've seen some really terrible marketing out there in terms of making jokes about this. That's not how you're going to get a client. I'd encourage any small business owner to put out relevant information about their community, about what's going on, stay engaged, talk to people, have conversations like this, right? Like one community conversations. That's our our core value here behind this.
I think
series.
I think the big thing with that though too, because I've been again just being an ear to like listen. I know that like this is also I'm finding a really obviously it's a hard time for everybody, and everyone you find is trying to like one up each other, like, oh well, I have that and like I'm gonna, where I think what I've been trying to do is just sort of like also like listen. And sometimes they're not necessarily looking for a response or for you to make it better. They're just looking for you to like just shut your trap and hear them. So I think that during this time, it's sort of I think super important for you to do that as well. You know what I mean? And I feel like I've learned that mostly from my kids because they'll bitch and I'll try to like come up with a solution. They're like, we don't want a solution. Like we're not looking for an answer, mom, And I think that there are some situations here too that are very much similar to that. They just want to sort of be heard so that they could like get it off their chest. And I'm certain that, everybody will figure out a way to sort of improve themselves going forward after they're able to like release that too. So
yeah, when you look at people's frustration, it's like if they've got nothing to do, if they're not staying engaged on something, I mean, kids is a whole nother story. So let's just cancel them out because they're going to complain
Oh,
about
of
stuff no
course.
matter what.
Everything. Yeah.
But just, adults, the mental health side of this thing, like, you referenced the domestic violence numbers, unfortunately, going up through this. The mental health side of this, to me, is directly correlated with people having a purpose. And right now, people are literally being told the only purpose you have is to stay locked up. And that's going to get harder as more time goes on. And that was kind of, where was going with this life reevaluation question is I just feel like a lot of people are going to have way too much time to think because they're not engaged in action or activities or work or whatever it may be. And you will see some really clear decisions that are made throughout this and after this where people make a dramatic change. And maybe that was building up and this was the moment that led to it.
So
PK
yeah,
or Greg? Go ahead, Greg.
yeah, and so my assistant just joined me. I'm at my standing desk, so you can't see. So my practice has been virtual for a number of years, and it's usually just me here at home in my home office, and my labradoodle who just joined me. But it's been a struggle because my wife has been home, and my daughter's 2.5, and last week specifically, and this is unique to me because of what was going on with the taxes, I worked more last week than I've worked in any week in any tax season, just getting my clients ready. But I hear them having fun. My office is right above the garage. I see my daughter and my wife outside having fun, and it's been pulling at me. I want to go join them. And I've been, trying to join them at least for a walk each day. So I'm looking forward to spending time with them this week as things hopefully slow up a little bit and I get some time before I kind of jump back in the taxes. So that's been tough. But the other thing that was tough for me, and it happened this weekend, and I've never really experienced this before, is my wife is also 38 weeks pregnant, and it's like a horrible time to even think about having to go to the hospital in the next couple of weeks. But I've been having her and my daughter stay home, and I've been going out to do the grocery shopping and being very conscious about what I'm touching and what I'm doing when I'm out. And I went out, and it took me 2 days to do what I had to do because when I went to the stores, I wasn't able to get in. Like physically, I was restricted in the amount of people that had to get in, and there was lines. And I then went to Lowe's because they said they had freezers in stock. I was thinking, man, if I only have an opportunity to get in the grocery store once, I'm going to need to stock up. I go there, you can't get a freezer. And I almost had a nervous breakdown because it was like, I have the ability, I've always had the ability to control the business to some extent, and financially we're okay. I have the means and the physical health to go out and get the things I need, but the market is restricting me from having the ability to do that. And that was really scary because it's like for me at that point, it almost got real. And it was like my financial means or the connections I have really don't mean anything at this point. And that was a little bit scary.
I think piggybacking that though too, I think this is also and again I'm hearing you like saying that like you had to work more this week, but I think part of the problem is too is that because your wife and your daughter have never been home, you've never had to mentally play that game of should I be out there with them or should I be staying in here?
Right.
And it does because I've got 3 kids here that I'm not even looking to hang out with them. I just legitimately need them to get to work. So my entire day is taking 5 times longer because like I'm constantly having to bounce back and forth. Or in your defense, look, if they're outside playing, which they're doing right now, it's like should I be out there doing that? Because like I don't want to be the bad guy all the time,
right?
Like so I think that's part of the problem too, is you've never had it in your face where you've had to mentally do that to yourself. Like you've had to mentally tell yourself, no, I can't go out there and play.
Right.
Like it's the temptation's never been there.
Yeah, and it's tough because do you want to?
No, I have 2 doors to my little office.
Oh, did she sneak in? Did your daughter sneak in?
And she broke through both doors somehow.
Perfect timing.
I don't know how she did that, but she did have perfect timing. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, she's given you 3 weeks, she's given herself 3 weeks to figure it out. I mean, you've been sitting in a locked room for 3 weeks.
She's getting pretty good at.
She's probably taken a spoon and made a hole for all you know.
Yeah. No, but that's the point. And it's been a struggle because my business has been built by design and I leverage systems and technology as much as I can. My typical tax season, I feel for the accountants that are putting in 60, 80 hours. it's rare that I would put in 40 hours even in a tax season. Because I leverage a lot of things and I do a lot of things throughout the year to make sure my clients, we're not playing catch up at year end. So that's tough. We're in this unique scenario where because of getting clients ready for the loans, created a different story. But I'm looking forward to getting a little more space, with my family this week. Hopefully, like I say, I check the updates every 6 hours for the government and that the guidance is changing. But and I definitely want to hear from Pat, but don't let us forget before we go off, I do want to give some insights for the individuals about the stimulus payments that are coming before we wrap up.
Please.
No, go ahead, Greg. Yeah, that's
yes. So for lack of a better term, the individual stimulus payments that are coming out, the IRS has promised two things this week for us. One is that they are developing a program where, as an individual, you'll be able to log in and track the status of your payment, so you'll know if and when it's coming. And the other is if you are somebody who the IRS does not have your account information on file because you typically don't get a refund and you maybe don't pay them electronically, they are also creating a portal where you'll be able to log in to give your direct deposit information so that you'll be able to get your stimulus rather quickly rather than them trying to track down your current address and send you a check. So those are two things for individuals to look forward to this week from the IRS.
The portal goes live on the 9th, right? I think 2 days from now.
I've heard rumors. I haven't seen any actual communication from the IRS directly, so I don't know, but I know it was promised this week. So
yeah, I think I was trying to find something else about the EIDL loan, and I think I ended up finding that portion of the IRS page. By the way, if you ever get a chance to read anything on the IRS website, don't.
Don't use any of this time for that.
Yeah, no, I think one of the weird side effects that I don't know about you guys if you find true or not is I call it hourly efficiency, right? Like I'll shoulder and admit that my per hour rate of efficiency is not nearly what it is sitting in an office. I live I live less than 10 minutes from my office. I live very close. I get there 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. I have several hours before anybody else shows up. I get super focused. I get a boatload of things done. Now my office is 15 feet instead of 15 minutes. And I find myself struggling to stay laser focused every hour. And I think I'm working more hours. I'm there, I'm sitting in front of the computer earlier and I'm there later. But, again, I keep looking to my side here. I have a TV on the wall where CNBC is always playing. I have to mute it because I keep listening to news stories and then they pull me off and things keep happening. So I find myself that, I'm not as dialed in, even though, Byron, like you isolated yourself a little bit, like Greg, I'm in our spare bedroom / office. And I mean, the saving grace for me has been literally, I keep talking about the Peloton bike thing behind me. You talk about your health. I'm doing 2 to 3 rides literally every day for the last 2 weeks since we got back from Florida. I mean, even when I was in Florida, that's really when, the crux of the market decline happened was, between the 11th and the 22nd is when I was down there. And, I spent a boatload of time on the phone then, and mentally it wasn't good because I'm out of pocket, right? I'm not near my office. I'm sitting on a laptop in Jupiter, Florida, which isn't really the same mentally as even in a spare bedroom in an office situation. And I'm so distracted. I tried to have a quote vacation and I couldn't. I was so busy doing other things. And you come back in here, and then you're trying to do, like, for instance, I'm going to take a small break when we're done here, and it's 60 degrees outside, which is not really a thing that we've had a chance to go do. I'm going to go walk. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to go take a walk because I need to just decompress, because this is the stuff that we talk about, all of us, all day long. And you really have to take some time and just be able to breathe and relax a little bit.
And what Greg said earlier, like that almost freak out moment, like going to the grocery store and in his situation, not being able to be let in, we've been really lucky in, where we all grew up in these parts of America to not have to deal with any of that kind of stuff ever in our lifetimes. And so I'd encourage everybody from a mental health standpoint, none of us are doctors or anything like that, but we've all been there. We've had that freak out moment, but try to avoid those freak out moments by avoiding the news, right? If I do want to read about experiences on, this epidemic, I find myself searching for blogs from Americans who are quarantined in Italy, from Americans who are quarantined in China, from their perspective, what's going on. There's a lot of blogs and a lot of Americans quarantined in Europe and in China that have written about their experiences. all the big news sources aren't publicizing any of that because they're caught up in hype and hysteria. And if you allow yourself to get caught up in all of their clickbaity hype, you will have you'll have more freak out moments. You're going to have some. We're all going to have some, because it's such quick, hard, drastic changes. But if you continue to consume yourself with all of that negativity, it's going to compound. I mean, if you really just break down the numbers, Pat said it earlier, this isn't that deadly. If you really dig into those numbers, it's scary. And all the situations we're faced with are really scary in terms of the economic pressure and the health crisis. But the majority of the people listening or watching this right now, fortunately, are not going to die because of this. So it's about a little bit of perspective there too.
If you're going to look at a headline, read the actual article. Otherwise, don't look at the headline.
Yeah, but
because you're gonna get skewed perspective, and it's not gonna work.
Some of these articles are atrocious.
My MO for years used to be, I used to watch The Simpsons and read the comics in the newspaper. That was the only thing I paid attention to.
Well, The Simpsons predicted this like everything else. So
100%.
All right, that's a good way to wrap this up. Certainly, if you want some more, I mean, this changes. Like, we started this conversation by saying this changes by the hour, almost by the day. I think these guys, if they've got time on Saturday, will be jumping back on to another real estate radio, which is Saturdays 94.9 News Now, sponsored by Service Station Equipment. We'll give away a ton of Martin's money and gift cards like we do every single week, and we'll do all the updates on what's going on, whether it's the economic stimulus package, the PPP loan, the markets in general. So tune in for that. We'll try to do another one of these next week and kind of do that middle of the week update as well. Pat and then Greg, why don't you guys give a shout out to where people can find you if they need to connect?
Yeah, so I'll go first. My website is insourcecpa.com. Well, we've actually added a page there that's getting updated every day. So that has all the latest information about whatever programs are going on, sort of aggregated in one place. And if you have any other questions or want to reach out, there's the contact information is there.
InsourceCPA.com.
So I'm on pretty easy, BarnumPlans.com. If you want to schedule a call with me, you can do it right through there. BarnumPlans.com/schedule. You can send me a direct message if you want. Instagram is I am Pat Kenny. Really easy to find there. I've been having a lot of those conversations with people that I'm already connected with, just asking stuff there, because I try to keep, very much like Greg does online, I try to keep people more apprised kind of on social media as much as I can.
And if you're watching this, obviously on Facebook, you know where to find Nicole and I. You can also go to oneincompany.com. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions about any of this stuff or specifically the market. Like I said, there's a lot of properties going under contract and under deposit. There was 543 in the last 7 days in 3 counties in Connecticut. So there is things happening in the market. And if you want to be updated on that, certainly feel free to reach out. Guys and Nicole, really appreciate all of your input and spending some time with us.
67 minutes.
67. Oof. Not a record, but
I've already had a few kids lap in. Luckily, they didn't photobomb me like they did you. But
yeah, I can't believe
it was only 60 minutes. I mean, it was only a matter of time, really.
I'm gonna spend the next 4 minutes of my life having a conversation with a 3-year-old about when the 2 doors are closed.
Oh my God! Good luck with that. My 9-year-old doesn't even listen to that.
Yeah, she'll never listen, I'm sure. Be well, be healthy, and see you guys soon.
Bye, everybody.
Stay safe, everybody.